I am live. It is Sunday, the 5th of May 2024, and I've started a new book, The Laird and the Lady. It is a novel, a fiction by Joan Marshall Grant. It was published in 1949, and it is about an American millionaires, heiress. She inherited millions, and she is traveling incognito to escape from fortune hunters. Anyway, this first chapter described her, which I read yesterday. Today I'm reading chapter 2 of the first part, and it is The Laird. Chapter 2. The young man went across to the table and began to pour out the coffee. 2 lumps? He asked, as though nothing could be more usual than breakfasting with a complete stranger who was presumed to be one's wife. 2 lumps, said Marylda, and black, unless it's real milk, without skin, or there's a strainer. He inspected the contents of the silver jug. Real milk, I think, but no strainer. It may be wiser not to risk it, if you mind skin as much as I do. He smiled. It is fortunate we already find a taste in common. He spread butter on a roll. Jam? There is no marmalade, I'm afraid. Jam, but only half a roll. I'm not hungry this morning. He brought it to her and put the cup on the bedside table. Head aching? He inquired. Only if I move it suddenly. I feel as though someone had been trying to screw it off my neck, but no doubt it will recover by the time I've had a bath. No bath. They haven't been able to light the boiler for years. Fuel shortage. Of course, said Marylda. How stupid of me to forget. Did you shave in cold water? They brought me a copper can and lent me this dressing gown. Pardon me if I display undue curiosity, but who are you, and how did we get here? I am Rowan Hairdry. Don't you remember? He sounded startled. You seemed quite coherent after you came round. I found it most reassuring. When I carried you up the hill, I thought you were going to die on me. That would have been a definite breach of manners. You carried me up the hill. Would it be too much to ask of what hill, and why had I to be carried? Well, you couldn't walk, and there was no one about, and it was raining hard. It seemed proper to take you towards the only light I could see. You'd had a crack on the head. Damn it, I'd walked 5 miles, and the only car I saw nearly ran over me when I tried to stop it. How odd, said Marylda. Perhaps the driver was drunk. No, you weren't drunk, he said consolingly. You tried to draw up too fast and skidded into a stone wall. How reassuring, said Marylda a little coldly. I hope I did not do no damage. Not a bit, for when I saw you charging at me, I did a neat vault over the wall into a nettle bed. Never moved quicker since I dodged a mortar bomb near Caen. I'm afraid your car's rather bent, he added, and the wall's not so good either. This gets interesting, said Marylda. I appear to have lost a car and gained a husband. You must be concussed. He looked at her with some anxiety. But you can remember all the essentials, can't you? Marylda wondered what he meant and decided to explore this unknown ground with caution. Not all of them, she said, with carefully feigned frankness. For instance, I forgot why you were walking through the rain in a rather remote part of France. When my car packed up, I shoved it into a field and set off to look for a garage or somewhere to sleep. I saw your headlights and waved you to stop. When I climbed back over the wall, you were out cold, and there was blood all over your face. I couldn't investigate much, for I hadn't a torch. It must have been annoying, she said, to be landed with a female juggernaut in unknown territory. Or is the territory, in fact, familiar? Couldn't know less about it. I've been staying near Valence with a cousin. We drove down together, but he met some people and decided to join up with them, and I wanted to get back to Scotland. So you are Scotch? You don't talk with an accent. He looked a little embarrassed. One doesn't, at least not if one goes to school in England. I was at Winchester. I've heard there is a cathedral there. He laughed politely as though she made a joke. You see, I'm an American and ignorant of England, she explained. He appeared to find this disconcerting. But you have practically no accent. I mean, no one would know you were American. Several of us don't talk out of the side of our mouth or chew cigar butts. You mustn't judge us by the cinema. I don't, he said hastily. I hardly ever go. It's not worth driving to Inverness just to waste a couple of hours cooped up in a stuffy theatre. Do you know many Americans? None, he said vehemently. I mean, that sounds awfully rude, but we're not all barbarians, she said kindly. There are some who have ceased to defend stockades against Red Indians, others who have not even a nodding acquaintance with gangsters. He blushed, and in silence helped himself to strawberries. The French, she remarked brightly, are so delightfully hospitable. Most people would have done no more than telephone for a doctor or direct us to the nearest hospital. There isn't a telephone. Then they could have sent someone with a message. You kept on saying you didn't want a doctor, and there wasn't really anyone to send. There is no one here except the butler and his wife, Honorine, who brought our breakfast. But who owns all this? Madame la Marquise. I didn't discover her name. Apparently, she's visiting her daughter in Morocco. I hope she doesn't come back and object to us occupying her room. It might be a little awkward to explain. Or do you think she would have been equally undismayed when you walked in carrying my wet and, I gather, somewhat bloody self? There are gaps in my memory of our arrival. What happened after you started carrying me towards the Highlights? I crossed a field studded with stones over which I frequently stumbled and reached a lane. It is excessively steep, so I presume there must be an alternative route to the castle. It is a castle rather than a chateau. The outer walls must be 50 feet high between the round towers. Fortunately, the gates were open, for I was in no mood for burglary, and they look strong enough to require dynamite. He grinned. I had no dynamite. An oversight which might occur to anyone, Marylda said graciously. I have neither an ice axe nor an elephant gun. One cannot make provisions for everything. But don't let me interrupt. We entered the outer courtyard, which I mistakenly expected to be paved or grassed. Apparently, it is a formal garden, for I tripped over low hedges which surround rose beds of particularly thorny variety. You should have kept to the path, said Marylda. It was too late at night to attempt a maze. How right. I admit to being a trifle hurried. The hound bayed with a certain intensity which suggested that an early arrival at the house would be expedient. What kind of hound? Fox, blood, or wolf? I think its ancestor must have had very Catholic tastes. Size rather than quality was their slogan, and in the fitful moonlight it appeared not much smaller than a donkey. He got up to make a formal bow. I may claim sufficient discernment not to have considered throwing you as a sop to Cerberus. This savage collop is more than grateful. Did you kill the poor dog? Fortunately, no hostile gesture was required. As it was obviously impractical to outdistance him, I made suitable noises, hoping that he would successfully translate them into the local idiom. To my intense relief, he proceeded to display a slobbering geniality. This sagacious, if inadequate watchdog then led us to the front door, which opens on an inner courtyard, and barked until I heard the bolts being drawn. An embarrassing moment. It was. I stood there, trying to think of a suitable opening sentence, but as usual in a crisis, my French deserted me. You remained unconscious. Blood trickled from your scalp onto the steps. The dog sat beside us like a good gun dog, waiting to retrieve. The door opened and, prompted Marylda, disclosed an ancient retainer wearing corduroy trousers and a coat of livery, red with silver buttons and braid. No doubt he had dressed somewhat hurriedly. In his right hand he held a revolver, in the other a candle, to be exact 2 candles in a silver stick. Prepared for the reception of either guests or burglars, the costume, en tout cas, like the parasols which can serve as umbrellas in a sudden shower, I can trust he realized the revolver was redundant. When he saw the dog was acting as our guide, he hastily thrust his weapon into a pocket of his tailcoat and ushered us into the hall. He gave some order to the dog which caused it to lope off down a cavernous passage, and then insisted on taking your feet while I kept a firm hold of your shoulders, in unsatisfactory method, for you sagged like a hammock until we laid you out on a couch. I was still unconscious? Out like a light, but your pulse wasn't bad. One is reassured, but the state is not becoming. You didn't snore, only breathed heavily. The retainer brought brandy, but I didn't give you any. It's not wise when one's been knocked out. I hope you had some yourself, she said hospitably. I did, about half a pint. I did, about half a pint, which I think slightly knocked the old boy. You're not really heavy, but the hill is exceedingly steep. What then? I tried to make him understand that there had been an accident, and you required a doctor. But either he's stone deaf or gaga, or both. For all he did was to say that everything here belonged to the English, and that we were quite safe, and would be hidden until we passed on to the next station. Underground, this must be one of the safe houses where the English and the Americans were hidden during the war. Correct. I found that out from Honorine. Apparently her husband, whose name is Tourbillon, is a bit hazy about time and apt to think the war is still on. She had nursed several of our people who had been shot up or made a bad landing, and she insisted that you were not seriously hurt and would be all right in a few days. You came round then while she was washing your face, so you know the rest. It was obviously no use to hatch. Candidly, I don't remember anything until Honorini brought me in the breakfast. You don't remember anything? No. Does it matter? Well, it's a bit awkward. He paused and then said reassuringly, Of course it doesn't matter. Don't give it another thought. And before she could ask any questions, he added, I'll go and get dressed if Tourbillon has brought my clothes back. He lent me this dressing gown while they were being dried. Marylda was not pleased at being left so abruptly and decided that it would be as well if this extraordinarily attractive young man could be made to lose some of the self-possession that she found impossible to share. So that was the end, actually, of this chapter 2, describing the lad. And the chapter 3 is entitled No Excitement. Sorry, this made me giggle. So this is a book by Joan Marshall Grant, and it just as well I decided to stop.